The Galactic Council chamber was, by any objective measure, the most impressive room in the known universe. Vaulted ceilings that seemed to reach into infinity, floating platforms for species that preferred different gravitational constants, translation matrices humming softly in 17 dimensions. The whole place screamed, "We are very important and also very old, please take us seriously." Which made it extra awkward that everyone present was currently experiencing what humans would call a grade A, pant-scrapping moment of terror. High Chancellor Vormis, a stately insectoid whose species had been maintaining galactic peace since before Earth figured out agriculture, stood at the central podium with all 6 of his legs trembling. Not the dignified trembling of age. The trembling of someone who just realized they left the oven on, except the oven is the entire political structure of civilized space and it's currently on fire. "Esteemed members of the Council," Vormis began, his translator converting his clicking mandibles into a somber baritone that echoed through the chamber. "We find ourselves in a situation that is, diplomatically speaking, extremely not good." Around the circular chamber, representatives from 43 species shifted uncomfortably. Well, the ones with bodies that could shift. Some just changed color in distress. Ambassador Quilnix, a 4-armed bureaucrat from Thexar Prime whose people handled most of the Council's actual paperwork, raised 2 of his hands in a gesture that roughly translated to "Please, don't make me say it out loud." "The Krelix Dominion has issued a formal challenge," Quilnix said, his voice cracking slightly. "Under the Treaty of Eternal Reasonableness, Article 7, subsection 12, paragraph... Oh, who cares? They've invoked the ancient right of single combat to contest Council authority." A collective groan rippled through the chamber. The Krelax. Of course it was the Krelax. For those unfamiliar with galactic politics, and lucky you if you are, the Krelax were the kind of species that made everyone else nervous at parties. 8 feet tall on average, serpentine, covered in scales that could shrug off most energy weapons, and possessing a cultural identity that revolved entirely around being the best at killing things in creative ways. They weren't in the Council because they preferred to maintain their independence, which mostly meant they liked to periodically remind everyone else that they could join anytime they wanted by conquering everyone. The ancient right of single combat was supposed to prevent actual wars. 1 champion per side. Winner takes the political point. Loser goes home, humiliated, but not, genocided. It was all very civilized. On paper, the challenge cannot be refused without dissolving the Council's legal authority, Vormis continued, somehow managing to sound even more depressed. "We must select a champion species. The champion will face Scarth the Unbroken in single combat in 30 galactic standard hours." "Scarth the Unbroken," someone whispered in the back. Several species made religious gestures. Scarth the Unbroken had earned his title by participating in 473 single combats across his career. His win-loss record was 473-0. He collected the spinal columns of worthy opponents as trophies. He'd never even been injured in a duel. "So," Quilnix said, pulling up a holographic display with all 4 hands, trying to project confidence and mostly projecting the body language of someone actively molting from stress. "Let's review our options for champion species, shall we?" The display cycled through the Council members, the Varelian Commonwealth, brilliant strategists, physically about as threatening as a bag of marshmallows. The Crystalline Collective, functionally immortal, but moved at a pace that made glaciers look speedy. The Thexarians, Quilnix's own people, great with paperwork, absolutely terrible at anything involving personal violence. It went on like this. 43 species. Not one of them had been selected by evolution to be particularly good at the kind of face-punching that would be required here. That's why they'd formed the Council in the first place, so they wouldn't have to keep hitting each other. "There is," Vormis said slowly, "one Council member we have not yet considered." Quilnix's display stopped on the most recent addition to the Council, a small blue planet, 73% water. One species that had achieved spaceflight through what could only be described as weaponized stubbornness and barely controlled explosions. "Oh no," Quilnix said. "Oh yes," Vormis replied. The humans had been admitted to the Council 6 months ago, mostly because they'd shown up in a ship that technically worked, brought decent snacks to the application meeting, and seemed friendly enough. Nobody had really thought about what humans might be good at beyond making surprisingly good sandwiches and asking uncomfortable questions during diplomatic sessions. Though primitives, someone objected, barely 200 years into space travel, designed specifically to be extreme. Never forget that nugget. list their hobbies as extreme sports, competitive cooking shows, and something called mixed martial arts. He paused. Their planet is classified as a Death World, Category 7. That got everyone's attention. Death World classifications went from 1 to 10, with 10 being atmosphere is literally acid. Earth was a 7, which meant it was the kind of place where evolution had decided that everything should either kill you or make you stronger for the next thing trying to kill you. They might actually survive the duel, Quilnix said quietly, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Do we have any better options? Vormis asked the chamber. Silence. The kind of silence that comes when everyone knows the answer is no, but nobody wants to say it out loud. Right then, Vormis said, trying to sound authoritative and mostly sounding tired. Someone contact the human diplomatic mission. Tell them we need to borrow one of their warriors for, and I cannot stress this enough, the most important fight in current galactic history. Should we mention the part about the spinal column collection? Quilnix asked. Let's maybe lead with the prestige and honor aspects first, Vormis suggested. And that was how humanity, having been in galactic politics for less time than some species took to plan a dinner party, got volunteered to save the Council from the most dangerous warrior in known space. This was either going to go very well or very badly, and nobody in the Council chamber was willing to bet which. Captain Tommy Briggs had been having a pretty good day, right up until it became the worst day of his life. He'd woken up in his quarters on the Earth diplomatic vessel Reasonable Discussion, eaten a breakfast burrito that only slightly violated several food safety regulations, and received orders for what his commanding officer had called a simple meet and greet with the Council. Easy assignment. Shake some appendages, smile at the weird-looking aliens, don't accidentally start an interstellar incident. Tommy had done 3 tours in the outer colonies and 2 peacekeeping missions on Mars. He could handle a diplomatic milk run. That confidence lasted right up until he walked into the Council chamber and saw what could only be described as the facial expression equivalent of a funeral, spread across 43 different species. Captain Briggs, High Chancellor Vormis said, with the enthusiasm of someone reading their own obituary, thank you for coming on such short notice. No problem, Tommy said, looking around at the galaxy's leadership and wondering why they all looked like they'd just watched their favorite sports team lose in overtime. So what's this about? My CO said something about Earth receiving a special honor. Ambassador Quilnix made a sound like a deflating balloon. All 4 of his arms were clutching a datapad so hard it was starting to crack. Tommy noticed he was also shedding what looked like skin flakes everywhere. That probably wasn't a good sign. Yes, Quilnix said. Special honor, that's, one way to phrase it. Captain Briggs, Vormis continued, how familiar are you with the Krelax Dominion? Tommy searched his memory. He'd skimmed the cultural briefings on the flight over. Big snake people. Really into personal combat? Not part of the Council because they think we're all soft? That's admirably succinct, Vormis said. They have issued a formal challenge to Council authority. According to ancient law, we must provide a champion to face their champion in single combat. We have selected Earth to provide this champion. There was a pause while Tommy's brain processed that sentence. I'm sorry, he said. You what now? We need you to fight their best warrior, Quilnix blurted out, his voice climbing an octave. In single combat, in front of the entire galaxy, in about 30 hours. He started malting faster. I'm so sorry, this is not how we wanted to welcome humanity to galactic politics. We had a whole orientation planned. There was going to be a buffet. Tommy looked at Vormis, then at Quilnix, then at the assembled council members, who were all suddenly very interested in their various communication devices. Let me get this straight, Tommy said slowly. Earth has been in the Galactic Council for 6 months. 6 months. And you're already volunteering us to fist fight your problems? It's not fist fighting, Vormis said, with the defensive tone of someone who knows they're on shaky ground. It's a formal duel governed by ancient traditions and… It's fist fighting, Tommy interrupted, with maybe some swords or whatever, but it's fist fighting. Yes, Quilnix admitted, shedding what looked like an entire arm's worth of skin. It's essentially fist fighting. Tommy pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay, sure, why not? Who am I fighting? Quilnix pulled up a holographic display with 2 of his remaining non-molting arms. The image that appeared was of a Krelax warrior that made the alien from Predator look like someone's friendly uncle. 9 feet tall, scales that looked like they could stop a truck, arms like tree trunks, a face that suggested its owner had never smiled at anything except the suffering of others. This is Scoth the Unbroken, Quilnick said quietly. Undefeated in 473 duels, master of 7 combat forms, owns a collection of spinal columns from his most worthy opponents. Spinal columns, Tommy repeated. He's very proud of them, Quilnick offered weakly. From an anthropological perspective, it's fascinating how he collects spines. Yes. Tommy stared at the hologram. Scarth stared back with the dead-eyed gaze of something that had been born to kill and had never questioned its life purpose. And what happens if I lose? Tommy asked. The council chamber somehow got quieter. Earth would be expelled from the council, Vormis said. The Krelax would gain significant political leverage. They might use it to expand their territory. Your species would lose access to council trade routes, defensive pacts, and basically all the benefits of membership. And my spine becomes a trophy, Tommy added. That part is traditional but not legally mandated, Quilnick said quickly. You could refuse. Technically, Tommy echoed. He looked around the chamber again. All these advanced species. Thousands of years of civilization. Technologies that could reshape planets. And not one of them could handle one oversized lizard with an anger problem. Can I ask why Earth specifically? Tommy said. And by Earth specifically, I mean me specifically, because I'm getting the feeling I'm the champion you're talking about. You're a military officer with combat experience, Vormis explained. Your file says you have extensive training in multiple combat disciplines. You've served in actual hostile environments. And most importantly, you're here right now, and we're on a very tight timeline. So I'm not the best warrior humanity has to offer, Tommy said. I'm just convenient. We prefer to think of it as fortuitous timing, Quilnick offered. Tommy laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who'd just realized the universe has a sense of humor, and it's terrible. Does my CO know about this? He asked. We've sent word to Earth, Vormis said. But interstellar communication delays mean we won't hear back before the duel is scheduled. So I can't even get ordered to refuse this, Tommy muttered. He looked at Scarth's hologram again. The Krelax warrior looked like he could bite through titanium and ask for seconds. What are my odds? And please don't lie to me with diplomatic nonsense. Real odds. Quilnick and Vormis exchanged a glance that said everything. Between 5 and 10%, Quilnick finally admitted. And that's assuming you get lucky and he underestimates you. 5 to 10%, Tommy repeated. We understand if you wish to decline, Vormis said, though his tone suggested this would be a disaster. We cannot legally force you to— I'll do it, Tommy interrupted. The entire council chamber seemed to inhale at once. You will? Quilnick asked, his malting suddenly stopping from sheer shock. Tommy shrugged. I mean, you picked Earth because we're from a death world, right? Because humans are supposed to be tough? Well, here's the thing about humans from death worlds. We're too stupid to know when we should quit. He pointed at Scarth's hologram. Besides, I've fought worse odds. I once got in a bar fight with 6 guys in a low-gravity environment. That was a weird Tuesday. This is just one guy. One really big, really scary guy who wants to add my spine to his collection. But still, just one guy. That's the spirit? Quilnick said, trying to sound encouraging and mostly sounding like he was trying to convince himself. We'll get you prepared. We'll brief you on Krelax combat techniques. You'll get me a decent meal and somewhere to think, Tommy said, and maybe someone who can explain the rules of this thing so I don't get disqualified for doing something stupid. Of course, Vormis said, relief flooding his voice. Whatever you need, Captain. Tommy took one more look at Scarth's hologram, then turned to leave the chamber. Captain Briggs, Quilnick called after him. Thank you. Truly. You're saving the council. Tommy stopped at the door. Let's see if I'm still alive in 30 hours before you thank me, Ambassador. And with that, he left to prepare for a fight he had maybe a 5% chance of winning, against an opponent who had never lost, for stakes he didn't fully understand, representing a species that had been in space for less time than some aliens took to plan a vacation. Just another Tuesday in the military, really. The council's preparation chamber turned out to be a multi-species conference room that had been hastily converted into what Tommy could only describe as the galaxy's most dysfunctional gym. Various pieces of training equipment from different worlds had been assembled, with the kind of coordination you'd expect from a group project where nobody communicated. Tommy stood in the center of it all, eating a protein bar he'd brought from the ship, while representatives from 7 different species argued about the best way to prepare him for imminent death. The key to victory, announced Chancellor Dorath of the Crystalline Collective, his body chiming like wind chimes as he gestured, is to accept the transient nature of physical existence, embrace the void, become one with the eternal. He's telling you to die with dignity, Quillnex translated, stress molding again, which is, respectfully, Chancellor, not helpful. It's very helpful for the soul, Dorath protested. I'm trying to keep my soul in my body for the foreseeable future, Tommy said, but thanks. A floating orb of compressed gas that represented the Vexillian hive mind drifted closer, speaking in a chorus of voices. Our analysis suggests dispersing your molecular structure across multiple locations. Confusion is an excellent defense. The enemy cannot strike what is everywhere and nowhere. Tommy chewed his protein bar slowly. Yeah, so humans can't do that. We're kind of stuck in one piece. It's a design flaw, I know. Have you tried? The hive mind asked, genuinely curious. Not successfully, Tommy replied. In the corner, Commander Thraxis of the Varentian Guard was assembling what looked like a full suit of ceremonial armor. It was magnificent. It was also approximately the size of a small car and appeared to weigh about 600 pounds. The armor of eternal resilience, Thraxis boomed, his species' natural volume control set permanently to shouting. Forged in the heart of a dying star, blessed by 12 high priests, proof against all conventional weapons. Can I move in it? Tommy asked. Well, Thraxis said, his enthusiasm dimming slightly. You can pivot. Somewhat. Can I pivot away from someone trying to rip my spine out? Replied Thraxis, admitted. Then I'll pass, Tommy said, but I appreciate the thought. Quillnex was pacing now, all 4 arms gesturing wildly. This is a disaster. We're supposed to be preparing him, and we're just offering him ways to die more creatively. He turned to Tommy. I'm so sorry. Our species haven't engaged in single combat in millennia. We've forgotten how. That's actually comforting, Tommy said. Means you've been doing the whole civilization thing right. A new voice spoke up from the doorway. Perhaps I can offer something more practical. Everyone turned to see a lean, 4-legged creature that looked like someone had crossed a cheetah with an accountant. This was Ambassador Krell, representing the Hunters of Sardax, one of the few council species that still maintained a warrior tradition. Captain Briggs, Krell said, moving into the room with predatory grace. I've studied the Kralax combat forms. I may not be able to teach you to defeat Ska, but I can at least explain what's going to try to kill you. Now that's useful, Tommy said. Talk to me. Krell activated a holographic display showing Scarth in various combat poses. The Kralax fighting style is based on overwhelming physical superiority. Scarth will be stronger, faster, and more durable than you. He's been trained since birth in combat techniques that have been refined over thousands of years. You're really selling this, Tommy muttered. I'm being realistic, Krell continued. His species has natural weapons. Claws, fangs, a tail that can break bones, scales that function as natural armor. In a straight fight, you will lose. Okay, Tommy said. So how do I make it not a straight fight? Krell's expression changed to something that might have been respect. That's the right question. The Kralax have one weakness. They're traditionalists. They believe in honorable combat. They expect their opponents to fight with similar honor. Honor's great and all, Tommy said. But I'm fighting to not die, not to win a sportsmanship medal. The dual rules prohibit weapons beyond ceremonial blades and personal augmentation, Krell explained. But they don't prohibit environmental awareness, psychological tactics, or adaptive strategy. Tommy smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You're saying I can cheat as long as I don't technically break the rules. I'm saying, Krell replied carefully, that survival doesn't require you to fight fair. It requires you to fight smart. Quillnex perked up. That's actually good advice. We have extensive records of the arena where the duel will take place. Variable terrain, environmental hazards for dramatic effect. It's designed for entertaining combat. Show me, Tommy said. The hologram shifted to display a massive circular arena, multiple levels, obstacles, what looked like energy barriers flickering at irregular intervals. It was less formal dueling ground and more gladiatorial death trap designed by someone who watched too many action movies. Tommy studied it, his tactical training kicking in. That's not a dueling ground, that's a battlefield in miniature. The Kralax insisted on traditional arena design, Vormis explained, joining the group. They believe combat should be a spectacle. Then let's give them a spectacle, Tommy said. He pointed at various features. Those energy barriers, how predictable are they? These may cycle on a 60-second pattern, Quilnix said, pulling up data. For safety reasons. Safety reasons, Tommy repeated. In a fight to the death. It's complicated, Quilnix offered. Tommy continued studying the arena. His mind was working now, processing the space like any other combat environment. Variables, advantages, disadvantages, ways to not die. The Krelax have been studying Earth's greatest warriors, Krell added. Unfortunately, they've been watching your entertainment media. Our what? Tommy asked. Your movies, your combat sports broadcasts. They think all human warriors either possess mystical powers or can perform impossible physical feats through sheer determination and dramatic music. Tommy started laughing. Actually laughing. Oh, that's perfect. How is that perfect? Quilnix asked, confused. Because they think we fight like movie heroes, Tommy explained. They don't know how we actually fight. They don't know about modern human military doctrine. They don't know we've spent the last few thousand years getting really, really good at pattern recognition and creative violence. He turned to face the assembled aliens, all of whom were looking at him with varying expressions of confusion and concern. Here's what you need to understand about humans, Tommy said. We didn't evolve to be the strongest or the fastest. We evolved to be the species that doesn't quit. We're pursuit predators. We don't win by being better. We win by being more stubborn than whatever we're fighting. That sounds inspirational, Dorath said. But Scarth is also quite stubborn. Yeah, but he's stubborn about fighting with honor, Tommy replied. I'm stubborn about not dying. There's a difference. Krell made a sound that might have been approval. You're going to exploit his expectations. I'm going to do whatever it takes to walk out of that arena alive, Tommy corrected. If that means fighting dirty, I'll fight dirty. If that means running away until he gets tired, I'll run. If that means talking trash until he makes a mistake, I'll do that too. Trash talking? Quilnix asked. Psychological warfare, Tommy explained. Humans are really good at getting in each other's heads. It's practically a sport for us. He looked at Scarth's hologram again, the undefeated champion, the collector of spines, the warrior who'd never even been injured. Scarth has never lost, Tommy said quietly. Which means he's never learned how to adapt. He's never had to change his strategy mid-fight. He's never experienced doubt. And you're going to give him all three? Krell finished. I'm going to try, Tommy said, probably while screaming and bleeding, but yeah, that's the plan. Quilnix looked at Tommy with all four eyes. You know you're probably still going to die, right? Probably, Tommy agreed. But here's another thing about humans. We've been probably going to die for our entire evolutionary history. Somehow we're still here. He finished his protein bar and tossed the wrapper in a waste receptacle. Now, someone get me the arena specs, Scar's fight recordings, and whatever intel you have on Krelax psychology. I've got about 24 hours to figure out how to make a 9-foot murder lizard regret his life choices. I'm starting to think we might have picked the right species, Vormis said quietly. Ask me again in 30 hours, Tommy replied, when we know if I still have a spine. The arena was packed, and when Tommy said packed, he meant representatives from about 200 different species had showed up to watch him either pull off a miracle or become an exotic centerpiece in Scarth's trophy room. No pressure. The arena itself looked exactly like the Hollows, except bigger and somehow more ominous when you were actually standing in it. Multiple levels, dramatic lighting, energy barriers crackling at intervals that were supposed to be predictable but felt random when your life depended on them. The whole place hummed with what Tommy assumed was either dramatic effect generators or the galaxy's collective anxiety made audible. Tommy stood at one end of the arena in standard Earth combat fatigues. He'd been offered ceremonial armor, fancy weapons, even some kind of honor sash. He declined all of it. If he was going to die, he was going to die comfortable. At the opposite end, Scarth the Unbroken made his entrance. It was, Tommy had to admit, pretty impressive. The Krelax warrior strode into the arena like he owned it, which technically he kind of did given his win record. 9 feet of scaled muscle and barely contained violence. His movements were fluid, predatory, each step radiating the confidence of someone who had never lost anything in his entire life. The crowd went silent. This was apparently traditional, the moment before combat where everyone contemplated mortality and the nature of violence. Tommy unwrapped a piece of gum and started chewing. The silence broke. Confused murmurs rippled through the audience. Scarth stopped his dramatic entrance and stared. You consume food before battle? Scarth's voice boomed across the arena, translated into something that sounded like gravel in a blender. "It's gum," Tommy called back. "Helps me focus. Want a piece?" More confused murmurs. Quilnix, watching from the council box, started molting so hard it looked like it was snowing. Scarth's eyes narrowed. "You mock sacred tradition." "I'm chewing gum, buddy," Tommy replied. "If that's mocking your traditions are kind of fragile." The Krelax warrior began the traditional intimidation ritual. It involved a lot of roaring, flexing, and displaying his claws while reciting his victories in battle. It was supposed to terrify opponents into forfeit. Tommy had watched the recordings. It was effective. Several species had surrendered before Scarth even threw a punch. Tommy waited until Scarth finished his big speech about honor and death and the glory of combat. "You done?" Tommy asked. Scarth snarled. "Face me, human." "Yeah, okay," Tommy said. "Let's do this." The opening bell chimed. Scarth moved. And Tommy discovered that all the recordings in the world don't quite prepare you for 9 feet of apex predator moving at you like a freight train with anger management issues. Scarth's first strike would have taken Tommy's head clean off if he'd been where Scarth expected him to be. Instead, Tommy was 3 feet to the left, having dodged with the grace of someone who'd spent his entire military career not getting hit by things that wanted to kill him. "Slow start," Tommy commented, backing up. "You warming up or what?" Scarth attacked again. And again. Each strike was precise, powerful, and would have ended the fight instantly if it had connected. The problem, from Scarth's perspective, was that Tommy kept not being where the strikes landed. Tommy wasn't faster than Scarth. He was just predicting where Scarth was going to attack. Pattern recognition. Humans were great at it. "So," Tommy said, dodging a tail sweep that would have shattered his legs, "fun fact about Earth. We've got these animals called honey badgers. Mean little things. Know what makes them special?" Scarth roared and lunged. Tommy rolled under the attack. "You don't care," Tommy continued, popping back up. "You can be bigger, stronger, scarier, doesn't matter. Honey Badger's gonna fight you anyway because honey badgers are too dumb to know when to quit." A clawed swipe caught Tommy's shoulder, drawing first blood. It hurt like hell. Tommy grinned through it. Guess which species studied honey badgers and thought, yeah, that's relationship goals. For the first time in 473 duels, Scarth looked confused. This wasn't how opponents behaved. They were supposed to be terrified. They were supposed to fight with desperate dignity. They weren't supposed to compare themselves to small terrestrial mammals while bleeding. Tommy pressed his advantage, not physically but psychologically. "You know what your problem is? You've never lost." "That sounds great, real impressive, but it means you've never had to adapt. You just do the same thing every time because it always works." He ducked another strike. "Me? I lose all the time. I've lost bar fights, arguments with my ex, poker games, lost a bet once and had to eat a raw egg. That was a bad day." Scarth was getting frustrated. His attacks were becoming less precise, more aggressive. Tommy kept talking. "Every time I lost, I learned something. You just learned you're the best. And that's great, right up until you're not." Tommy landed his first real hit, a quick jab to Scarth's ribs that did approximately 0 damage but proved a point. You could hit the undefeated champion. The crowd was going insane. Quilnix had molted so much he was basically transparent. The other council members were experiencing emotions their species hadn't felt in millennia. Scarth backed up half a step. Just half a step. But it was the first time in his career he'd retreated. "There it is," Tommy said, still grinning despite the blood running down his arm. "That little voice in your head going, 'Wait, this isn't how this is supposed to go. Welcome to doubt, big guy.' It sucks, doesn't it?" The Kralax warrior's eyes changed. The confidence flickered. For the first time, Scarth was in a fight he didn't understand. And Tommy, bleeding and outmatched and running on spite and tactical analysis, pressed forward. "Round 2, he said. "Let's see if you can adapt." Scarth adapted, just not fast enough. The problem with being undefeated for your entire life is you develop patterns. Comfortable patterns, effective patterns. Patterns that work right up until someone's been watching your highlight reel for 20 hours straight and knows exactly what you're going to do 3 moves before you do it. Tommy had spent his prep time doing homework. While the council had offered philosophical advice and ceremonial armor, he'd been watching every single one of Scarth's recorded fights, not for inspiration, for data. "Left feint, right claw, tail sweep," Tommy narrated, dodging all 3 in sequence. "You do that combo when opponents back into the second quadrant. Every single time." Scarth snarled and switched tactics, going for a grapple instead. Tommy dropped low, rolled, came up behind him. "See, that's better," Tommy said. "You're thinking now. Problem is, I've been thinking the whole time." The thing about human combat doctrine that the galaxy didn't understand yet was that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They'd gotten really good at it. Not through individual superiority, but through observation, adaptation, and a willingness to do whatever worked even if it wasn't pretty. Tommy wasn't winning through superior skill. He was winning through sheer analytical stubbornness and a complete lack of shame about fighting dirty. When Scarth charged, Tommy used one of the arena's energy barriers, timing it so Scarth ran face first into a crackling field of pain. When Scarth tried to corner him, Tommy used the terrain, leading him over unstable ground that shifted under the Krelax warrior's weight, but not Tommy's lighter frame. "You're thinking this isn't honorable combat," Tommy said, breathing hard now. The adrenaline was wearing off and the pain was setting in. "And you're right. Know what it is?" He grabbed a handful of arena dirt and threw it in Scarth's eyes during the warrior's next lunge. "Survival," Tommy finished. The crowd was losing their minds. Half of them were cheering. The other half were experiencing existential crises about what combat was supposed to look like. Quilnix had molted completely through his outer layer and was working on a second one. Scarth wiped his eyes, roaring in frustration. "You dishonor yourself." "I'm honoring my spine's desire to stay in my body," Tommy shot back. "Different priorities." The Krelax warrior was stronger, faster, and more durable. But Tommy had something Scarth had never needed to develop: the ability to win from a losing position. Humans had been doing it for their entire existence. Slower than predators? Outrun them over distance. Weaker than prey? Use tools. Outmatched in every way? Change the rules of engagement. Tommy kept up his running commentary, partly to mess with Scar's head and partly because if he stopped talking he might start screaming. His shoulder was definitely dislocated. At least 2 ribs were cracked. His left leg felt like it was on fire. But Scarth was breathing heavy too, and more importantly, Scarth was hesitating. "You've never been in a long fight," Tommy observed, circling. "All your matches end in minutes. You've got power but no endurance training. Me? I run marathons. Well, I ran one marathon. Hated it. But the point stands." He was right. Scarth's movements were getting slower. Not much, but enough. The Krelax warrior had trained for overwhelming victory, not extended combat. Tommy had trained for everything going wrong, and still having to finish the mission. "Here's what's happening," Tommy said, more to himself than Scarth now. "You're experiencing what humans call the oh shit moment. That moment when you realize you might actually lose. It's terrifying. Trust me, I have like 6 of them every day." Scarth charged again, but this time there was desperation in it. Tommy sidestepped, grabbed the warrior's arm, used his own momentum against him, and sent him crashing into one of the arena's support pillars. The crowd went silent. Scarth slowly got up, and for the first time in 473 fights, he was hurt. Actually hurt. A crack ran along his supposedly impenetrable scales. Green blood seeped from the wound. Tommy stood there, swaying slightly, every part of his body screaming. "We can keep going," he said quietly. "Or you can yield. I'm good either way, but full disclosure, I might pass out in the next 5 minutes, regardless." Scarth stared at him, then at his own blood, then back at Tommy. "You are not the strongest?" Scarth said slowly. "Nope," Tommy agreed. "Designed specifically. Not even close. But you refuse to accept defeat." "That's kind of our whole thing," Tommy said. "We're the species that looked at every predator on our planet and said, 'Yeah, but have you tried just not dying?' And then we didn't die. We're real annoying that way." Scarth made a sound that might have been laughter, or a death rattle, hard to tell with Krelax. "I understand now why the Council chose your species," the warrior said. He straightened up, towering over Tommy, even while injured. "You are not warriors, you are survivors. There is a difference." "Is that a compliment or an insult?" Tommy asked. "Yes," Scarth replied. Then he moved. One last attack, the fastest, most precise strike he'd thrown all fight. Tommy's body, running on fumes and spite, moved on instinct. Not away. Forward. Into Scarth's guard. Inside his reach, where all that strength and speed didn't matter because there was no room to use it. And Tommy, using every dirty trick he'd learned in bars and basic training and 3 tours fighting in environments that wanted him dead, landed one perfect sucker punch right to the crack in Scarth's scales. The Krelax warrior's eyes went wide, then rolled back. Then he fell like a tree, crashing to the arena floor. Tommy stood there, fists still extended, not entirely sure what had just happened. The referee, some kind of floating orb, drifted down to examine Scarth, scanned him, beeped something that translated to unconscious but alive, then floated over to Tommy and declared him the winner. The arena exploded in sound. Tommy had exactly 5 seconds to enjoy his victory before his body reminded him that he'd just been in a fight with a 9-foot murder lizard, and probably shouldn't be standing. He wasn't entirely sure if he collapsed or if gravity just got more aggressive, but either way he ended up on his knees while medical teams swarmed the arena. Half of them went to Scarth, the other half went to Tommy, scanning him with devices that beeped in what he assumed were concerned tones. "Is he dead?" Tommy asked, nodding towards Scarth. "Unconscious," one of the medics replied. "You cracked 3 of his ribs and gave him a concussion. He'll recover." "Good," Tommy said, then passed out. He woke up in a medical bay that looked like someone had crossbred a hospital with a spaceship and possibly a luxury hotel. Quilnix was there, fully remolted and looking significantly less stressed. "You won," the ambassador said, stating the obvious. "Yeah," Tommy croaked. "Got the participation trophy and everything." "The participation trophy is getting to keep your spine," Quilnix replied. "Which you did. Congratulations." The door opened and High Chancellor Vormis entered, followed by what looked like half the council, and surprisingly Scarth himself, moving slowly but upright, with bandages wrapped around his torso. "Captain Briggs," Vormis began, with the tone of someone about to deliver a very formal speech. "If you're about to promote me, don't," Tommy interrupted. "I liked my old job. It had less death." "We were going to offer you a position as the council's military advisor," Vormis said, "but we can discuss that later." Scarth moved closer, looming over Tommy's medical bed. Tommy tried not to flinch. Old habits. "You fought without honor," Scarth said flatly. "Yep," Tommy agreed. "You used tricks, deception, and environmental advantages." "Also yep." "You refused to engage on my terms, and forced me to adapt to yours." "That's pretty much what happened, yeah." Scarth was quiet for a moment. Then, "Teach me." Tommy blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Teach me these tactics," Scarth repeated. "I have studied combat my entire life. I know 17 forms. I have defeated every opponent. And you beat me with techniques I have never encountered." He paused. "I wish to understand how the weak defeat the strong." "We're not weak," Tommy said. "We're just differently optimized." "Semantics," Scarth replied. "Will you teach me?" Tommy looked at Quilnix, who shrugged all 4 shoulders, looked at Vormis, who seemed equally confused, looked back at Scarth. "You know I'm gonna teach you stuff like throw dirt in their eyes and fight like you've got nothing to lose because you probably don't, right? It's not gonna be elegant." "Elegance is worthless if it results in defeat," Scarth said. "I learned this when you punched me in my cracked rib." "That was a good punch," Tommy admitted. "Hurt my hand, though." The Krelax warrior made that sound again that might have been laughter. "The Krelax Dominion wishes to open diplomatic relations with Earth. We find your approach to violence refreshing." "That's possibly the most terrifying sentence I've heard today," Quilnix muttered. "And I've fought for my life," Tommy added. Vormis cleared his throat. "Captain Briggs, you've secured Earth's position in the Council, demonstrated that humanity brings unique capabilities to galactic politics, and apparently started a cultural exchange program with our most dangerous neighbors. On behalf of the Council, thank you." "You're welcome," Tommy said. "Can I go home now?" "After medical clearance," Vormis replied, "and debriefing. And possibly a medal ceremony." "Skip the ceremony," Tommy said. "Just send me the medal. I'll put it on my desk next to my participation trophies from middle school." As the council members filed out, Quilnix lingered. "You know this means Earth is now seen as the council's problem solvers, right? Every time something needs punching, they're gonna call you?" "Fantastic," Tommy said. "Tell them I charge overtime." "I'm serious," Quilnix said. "You've changed how the galaxy sees humanity. You're not the new species anymore. You're the species that refuses to lose. That's going to come with expectation." Tommy thought about that. About Earth. About humanity's tendency to wander into situations they didn't fully understand and somehow survive through sheer stubbornness. "You know what?" he said finally. "I'm okay with that. Because here's the thing about humans, Quilnix. We've been the underdog for our entire evolutionary history. Every other species on our planet was faster or stronger or had better natural weapons. We survived anyway. We thrived anyway. He shifted in the medical bed, wincing at his various injuries. So yeah, let the galaxy know. Humans don't quit. We don't give up. And we're really, really good at figuring out how to win when we're not supposed to. That's our contribution to the Council. That's what we bring to the table. And good sandwiches, Quillnux added. Sandwich is excellent, Tommy agreed. Don't undersell the sandwiches. Later, after everyone had left and Tommy was alone with his thoughts and his painkillers, he pulled up a message screen and recorded a note to send back to Earth. Hey, Command, he said to the camera. So, funny story about that diplomatic mission you sent me on. Long story short, I got in a fight with a giant lizard, won on a technicality and creative violence, and apparently now we're the galaxy's official tough guys. The good news is, we're definitely staying in the Galactic Council. The bad news is, they're probably going to keep asking us to punch their problems. He paused, considering. On reflection, that's very on brand for humanity. Briggs out? He sent the message and leaned back, staring at the ceiling of an alien medical bay, on a station orbiting a planet he couldn't pronounce, having just secured humanity's place in galactic politics by refusing to accept that a 9-foot warrior should logically have killed him. Just another day in the life of humanity, really. The universe kept telling them they couldn't do things. They kept doing them anyway. Somewhere in the station, Scarth was already studying recordings of the fight, analyzing every dirty trick, every environmental exploit, every moment where Tommy had survived when he shouldn't have. The Krellax warrior was learning a valuable lesson. When you fought humans, you weren't just fighting their bodies. You were fighting 10,000 years of evolution that had looked at every disadvantage and said, but what if we just didn't care about that? And that, more than any weapon or any technology, was what made humanity dangerous. They simply refused to lose. Even when they probably should. Especially when they probably should. That was the human way. And the galaxy was just starting to figure it out.